Wonderful. So hi and welcome everybody. My name is Erin Uritas and I'm the Director of Communications and Business Development for International School Services, or otherwise known as ISS. This webinar is the fourth in a series presented by ISS as part of our commitment to helping connect the world's best educators and international schools. So if you were here with us for the first three webinars or any of them, you learned about the benefits of taking your career overseas, and then the best advice and tips for helping you make the most of the very important recruiting fairs in this world, or what we sometimes call IRCs. And if you haven't seen those, please check them out on our website or the ISS YouTube channel. Those are really chock full of really good advice as you're really in the swing of the season. And we'll have lots of helpful tips for you. Now is that time of year when recruiting is in full swing for educators and administrators alike. You may be joining us today as an aspiring administrator or already be serving in a leadership position and want to make the jump into international administration. So no matter what level you are or where you're from, today's webinar is full of important insight and practical advice and will help you better consider this option and make the jump into the exciting world of international administration. Throughout the year, we will continue to host more events like this one. We're doing, we've been doing, one a month, and we're committed to that, where you can learn about how to find and thrive in international education jobs. Please continue to check out the ISS webpage at iss.edu and visit the Career Services section where you can simply click on Find an International Education Job, or Admin Search also has its own web section. We are recording today's webinar, so if you have colleagues or friends that were not able to make it, please feel free to pass on that link once we post it. Again, it should be up within 24 to 48 hours. Just a short bit of housekeeping before we begin. We really encourage anyone online listening to ask questions, because our panelists really want to engage with you and hear your questions and answer as many as we can. So note that there is a box on your screen, most likely in the upper left, where you can type questions into when you hit that Q&A button. Make sure that you direct your questions to that Q&A button. Although I've been asking people to type in where they're writing in from in the chat, this is really the last time we're going to be monitoring the chat. So the Q&A button is really where you want to put your questions. You can type those in at any time. We will be kind of synthesizing and looking through those and then addressing those at the end. And Christina and Tawan on the global recruitment team will be monitoring those and monitoring the Q&A section discussion at the end. So if there are any technical issues, again, with what you're seeing on your screen, please go ahead and click on the link I pasted in the chat room, where you can download and view the presentation directly from your computer and follow along. Again, we do not anticipate that, but it's always there as a backup, or if you just like, a reminder about what's on the slides. So let's get started. We are glad that you're here to learn from and engage with our seasoned expert panel today. We're super excited. Three of our speakers have led numerous international schools all over the world, and many of them are quite different in size, curriculum, ownership, arrangement, and other dimensions. They all have unique perspectives and helpful advice on finding an admin position and growing your career in the overseas international school arena. And the ISS Global Recruitment Team has also hosted and helped thousands of educators and hundreds of administrators like you in our search division land a dream position. So without further ado, I am really pleased and excited to introduce Mr. Dave Randall, who is an ISS Senior Leadership Executive for Governed Schools and Admin Searches. Dave has served in overseas schools as a teacher, principal, finance director, and head of school, and has worked at 11 schools all over the world, serving the last three of these as interim head of school. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Beth Fennell. She is ISS Vice President over Admin Searches, and she lives and works from Rome. Beth has more than 30 years of experience in international education and was most recently head of the American Overseas School of Rome for the past 10 years. She has also been president of AAIE and the Rome International Schools Association. And in addition to leading Admin Searches, she also runs our wonderful Marianne Haas Women's Leadership Symposium. Next, we are really excited to have with us Mr. Brad McLean, who is head of school at the Ambatovi International School in Madagascar, and that is where he is calling in from today, which is his 6th international school. Brad has lived and worked overseas for 35 years at international American curriculum schools in many locations, and his bio on our webinar page and the ISS website includes a compelling philosophy that recognizes international school leadership as a multifaceted and holistic process and should be inclusive of all school stakeholders, which I think is a wonderful philosophy. And you can read more about that and any of our panelists on our webinar site page, where you can their bios and photos are up there. And last but certainly not least, Miss Ashley Wodaway has been part of the international education community for many years. She is the admin search team coordinator, and she supports Beth and Dave as they lead global searches to fill high-level admin positions worldwide. She's really a go-to person when it comes to the details of coming on with ISS for your search and the ins and outs of the process. Finally, Christina Eberhardt is a member of the global recruitment team, and she's helped set up this webinar. She'll be part of today's conversation and will be helping, again, manage that Q&A section at the end. So without further ado, just briefly, let me talk about what we'll cover today. So we will talk about similarities and differences between US and overseas schools, finding and thriving in an international school leadership job, how ISS will assist you, your school in your transition, and then we will move to questions and answers. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started with Dave Randall on the next slide.
Well, let me add my welcome to all of you. It's interesting that Aaron just introduced 6 people, and we're all 6 in different locations, from Madagascar to Sweden to North Carolina to Colorado, and 1 in Princeton, where the home office is. I think the main thing that I want to stress on not only this slide, but as we move on, is the degree of diversity that exists in these international schools. There are literally thousands of these schools around the world, and each will be somewhat unique. So it's somewhat hard to generalize, and you often may hear us answer your questions starting with, well, it depends, etc. So just be prepared for that, because these are not schools are not all the same. However, most are private. Almost all will be private. Most will not be part of any government system, but many will have to comply with government regulations, and that can be labor laws, curriculum requirements, etc. Most will have English as their language of instruction, but there may be requirements in some countries to also teach certain classes in the host country language. Most now have pre-kindergarten programs or early childhood programs, but they could be PK through 8 or PK through 9 or PK through 12. There are some that are only elementary schools and some that are only secondary. And some will be boarding schools, a few. Most are day schools. Most of the schools will offer some type of international curriculum. Many offer the International Baccalaureate or IB. Some offer the AP in the secondary level, and some just have their own curriculum. In many countries, there will be elements of the host country curriculum that are required. And in many situations, the international school will also be considered the best local school as well, and many will serve as a center of community activities. Accredited or in the process of accreditation. ISS tends to work only with accredited schools or schools in the process of seeking accreditation. Just remember, I said there were thousands of these schools that call themselves international schools. Many are not accredited, and you should consider that when you're looking at possibilities. Most of our international schools are not religious, and they do not espouse any type of particular religious beliefs. There's all religions and cultures and creeds are welcome. But there will be some religious schools that will have religious elements in the school day, and actually also in the selection process of staff. So that's something you would want to check into. The traditional model of school was like an American style school when most of these started. They were not-for-profit schools. They had a PTA and a parent elected board. That has changed to some extent. While some are still that way, there really are more now that are more private for-profit schools. The owner may be an individual who's just wants to start a school, wants to start a school, or it could be a corporation that may own multiple schools even in different countries. Student population, normally the student population comes from multiple countries, but there can be exceptions. Sometimes the schools established to provide a Western style education for host country nationals, so they predominate in the population. And in some schools, like the school I was in Pakistan a number of years ago, the large expatriate population that once existed no longer does, so that school now is predominantly Pakistani. International schools can offer an excellent second career option for people. Many people have retired from administrative careers in their home country and have pursued second careers overseas. However, keep in mind there may be age restrictions in some countries. These are imposed by the government, not by the school. This usually has to do with work permits and so forth. As to governance, these schools are governed in a variety of ways, and Beth will address that in the next slide. So let us transition to Beth and the next slide.
Hello and welcome everybody, and I'm talking to you from Sweden where I'm on a school visit. I'd like to talk now about how schools are the same, whether your host country or your home country is in North America or another country. Children are children, and as we say, children all smile in the same language. And we believe that children's needs are the same everywhere in the world. Parents are looking for quality education everywhere. And depending on the school, there are different types of parent involvement. Cultures, of course, influence this because in some cultures, parents do not come to school often nor are expected to come. And in other cultures, they're expected to be partners in their children's education. Best practices, we know that in ISS schools that are run around the world, we use best practices based on research-based approaches. We also know that many schools are accredited, and that gives some guarantee to best practices implemented in schools. But as Dave mentioned, it's important to look carefully at the accreditation of a school when considering an employment offer. Schedules, calendars, and vacations. Most schools around the world are in session between 170 and 185 school days. Depending on where you are, the calendar and vacation schedule will differ. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere and a school is on a North American schedule, you may have a 2-month vacation from mid-December to mid-February, and then go back to school and continue at the same grade level or the same school year. School vacations tend to be, again, similar as far as the number of vacation days, but they may be at different times of the year. And of course, different countries have different calendars and holidays that they celebrate. School boards vary considerably. Some are parent-elected boards. Self-perpetuating boards mean that the board members themselves nominate somebody to replace them when they leave the board, and this is not done by election. Some boards are run by companies or corporate boards, and Brad might add to that when he speaks later on, because he works for a school that is run by a company. And some boards are run by foundations. On our next slide on how our school is different, we can say that every country has its own requirements. Excuse me. Host country requirements, and that would mean labor laws or union laws, and it's important to study those and to understand that. The ability to impact change and implement initiatives in schools overseas is very different than in in your home country. And that means that in some countries you might do that through consensus building with your leadership team, with your teachers, with your staff members. In other countries, it may mean that it's easier to implement change by making decisions, again, in consultation, but not necessarily needing consensus to do that. Again, depending on laws, every country is unique and every school overseas is unique. Curriculum will vary. Some schools are AP and IB, some are one or the other, some are neither. Some have the British curriculum, the IGCSE, some use the Aero standards, or some, again, use a hybrid of all of these. There are schools overseas where host country students are required to follow a host country curriculum and then may graduate with several diplomas. It could be the American diploma, US diploma, as well as an IB diploma, as well as the local host country diploma. The financial capabilities of international schools versus public schools, again, varies considerably. As Dave mentioned, schools are private schools for the most part, and that means that they run on tuition revenue. And depending on tuition and depending on the fee structure, every school is somewhat unique. School as the focus of the community is very different than your home country, because you will find that you're part of a school community in so many different ways. You'll attend school events in the evening and on weekends. The school becomes a primary focus of your job as a school administrator. You're expected to be around and available much more than you might have been if you were a school administrator in your own host country, in your home country. You find yourself being responsible for taking care of people and their needs that you might not have had to do in your home country. And schools for profit are a different kind of school. They might be proprietary schools that are owned by an individual, and then you're not working for a board, but you're working for an individual who may be looking to make money out of the school. So it's important to have very clear conversations with the school owner on what their expectations are. The expectations of parents and board members and staff and students varies considerably on the school. Remember that there will be many different cultures in schools. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the role of parents will vary, where we may be accustomed to parents being involved in their child's education. In some cultures, that is not expected, nor is it seen as a good thing to do, because the teacher or the school has the ultimate authority, and parents do not expect to be involved in that. So it's a good book to read about and to get good understanding about this is called The Culture Map, and it gives good explanation of different cultures and how we need to be open-minded to this. Life, children, travel, social commitments. Living overseas, if you're with a family and your own children, becomes a very exciting adventure. And the family unit becomes a very close unit, especially if you've changed countries a few times or changed schools. Your home becomes the home where you're living with your children, with your family. You have huge amount of travel opportunities. Your social commitments within the school community are oftentimes intense. but very important because the school, as we mentioned, becomes a central part of your life. As far as the advantages for children growing up overseas, in my opinion, they are considerable. And as I often joke, because I have 3 children who've grown up overseas, you end up working for plane tickets because for them, the world is their backyard. They have friends all over the world. And that's what happens when you work and live in different countries. They meet children and they make friendships that last forever, and people live all over the world. It becomes a smaller and smaller world every day. Now we'll go to the next slide, and Brad will talk about what it's like to be an administrator overseas.
Well, thanks very much, Beth. Salama from Madagascar. Before I get into the slide, I guess I'll go back to the comment that Beth made about the school that I'm at, Ambatavi International School, is kind of one of those unique schools. We're an ISS managed school, but we're owned by a company, a mining company. So all of the children at our school are children of expats who work at the mining company. So kind of the variant on us is the company can really use our school as a recruiting tool when they're looking for, the best and the brightest people for their company. They can talk about the school that's here, and they can recruit upper and middle management, which is more likely to have families. So on to my title, Finding the Right Overseas Opportunity and Thriving as an International School Leader. As I go through these points, I'd really like to encourage any of my colleagues on the panel, please don't hesitate to jump in with any comments that you might have. I'm going to kind of go off cue and go straight to the last one, because the last comment is find that important work-life balance. And for me, that's really critical, because as I encourage people to look for overseas schools, or when I recruit people to come to my school, I'll often say it's got to be a mutual fit. You're looking for a school that you're going to fit into, but you also want to find a school that fits you. So in that context, I'll go back up to the first point. Learn about the school and its issues early on. Listen. And when I say issues, I guess I'd go with, maybe we should think about that as challenges or opportunities. The listen part is, really actively listen, and try to actively listen from a different stakeholders' perspectives. As you find out about school, think about what's that school like for parents, for the students, for the teachers, not just for yourself as a potential administrator. And then ask yourself, how do those things stack up with your own strengths and your own experiences? And what I'm going to try to do is kind of split this into each of these points into 2 ways, trying to get the job and then once you're there. So once you have a position as an overseas administrator, it's even more important to actively listen to all of those stakeholder positions. I really believe that our roles as administrators is to build capacity in individuals and build capacity in the community. And that, I think, lends itself to really enriching any school and enriching the staff with whom you work. I'll go on to the next point. Learn about labor laws and the rights of faculty and staff members versus management. Any country is going to prefer to hire its own nationals, but most countries are willing to bring in and provide visas for expats in positions that their nationals can't fill, right? But the labor laws are going to apply to everyone, okay? There could be limits such as tax benefits. It's really important to find out about those labor laws as they apply to your faculty, to your staff, and to yourself. Many countries are very pro-labor with extensive support, sick leave, maternity leave, paternity leave. Harassment, sexual or harassment is a very hot topic in the United States right now. It's a hot topic worldwide. And that's the kind of information that we all need to understand based on where we are. And, employment security. What laws protect your teachers? What laws protect you? The next one is learn as much as you can about labor laws. So away from the context of labor rights for staff, generalize that to all workers. It's really important to know labor laws as they apply to workers. What may seem to may have a complete lack of sense may or may not have a solid rationale given some unknown context. So rather than being too judgmental, try to step back from it and ask the people around you. Go back into that listening mode and really try to understand the context, because everybody is going to be bound by those laws. Next point is recognize the school's strengths and past work. I don't think this can be overstated. When you're interviewing or once you have a job, recognizing that the work that people have put in and will be putting into the school really shows that past and future work will be appreciated. Be sure to be able to reference a school's successes. When you're trying to get a job at a school, be sure to show them that you've taken the time to learn what they should be proud of. And you can figure that out by how high it is or how prominent it is in their advertising. Next point is learn about the school culture. Recognize and reach out to the host country staff. Well, I'm going to focus more on once you've got the job, because that would be very difficult to do before you get the job. But to a great degree, we utilize the rotation of foreign hire staff to bring in a vitality or an energy, bring in the latest and best practices. But it's the host country staff that we rely on for the longevity, for the organizational memory, for the internal structure of the school community. And to really, truly engage the local parent community, you've got to engage that host country staff. It goes back to appreciating the good work and appreciating your staff and your parents and your students as people. What do they bring to the school as people? What's their story? The more that you can really flesh that out, the stronger you are and the stronger your school becomes. Next point, refrain from making comparisons about your prior school. It's hard to do, but it just sounds bad. It's just really poor communication. You may have been a veteran at your old school and you really understand what it likes to be there. So when you talk about your old school, it just resonates. But what it sounds like is my old school had it together and I can fix your school because we used to have that problem and now we're better, right? Your old school wasn't like this new school. Each of those schools, like Dave said early on, each of these schools is unique. There's lots of similarities, lots of differences, but each school is unique. And if you reference your old school too much, it just sounds condescending. So my suggestion is if you're presented with a problem, whether you're recruiting or whether you're talking to your new school board, it's better to references the processes that you have, those tools, that skill set that you have. So you can say, well, in my experience, we went through this process in order to solve a similar problem. Okay, those skills are transferable. You can bring those forward and really enrich a new community. And my final point here, find that very important work and life balance. That's where I started. You've really got to be true to yourself, at the same time being open to new experiences. Make sure that there are options available that enable you to rejuvenate yourself physically, rejuvenate spiritually, and not just in the religious sense. I'm kind of energy-wise. You've got to be able to find that balance and find things that, whether you're in the United States or whether you're in another international school, what is it that you really enjoy doing that brings you energy? Find a way to continue doing that or transform it and tweak it a bit. Time management is essential as well. Time is a scarce commodity, and you may need to budget or schedule times to find time to do those things. If you come with a spouse or a life partner, budget time to support that relationship. Those are critical things to carry through. Anybody want to add anything to those?
Brad, first of all, what a great summary you had there. This idea about making comparisons, it's been my experience that when you go into a new school, there are things that are taking place there, and you're going to wonder why. Just keep in mind that at some point in the past, there was a good reason for why that was put into place. So before you think about it has to be changed, find out why it was there in the first place. Because
it's almost like a treasure hunt when you get to a new school, right? You got to go in, and I love this saying I read somewhere. You got to hit the ground learning. Your first day, and you just got to learn everything that you possibly can about that new school from as many different perspectives as you can, right? So with that, Dave, you've got the next slide talking about ISS. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about ISS and where we are, and I'm going to mention it again at the end, but you can find complete information on this on our website, but I'll point you in the right direction in a minute. First of all, ISS was founded in 1955, so we're an organization that's over 60 years old. It was founded by a man named Joseph Swetzer, who was motivated somewhat by post-World War II happenings and his desire to create a global community. We're the only full-service organization serving international schools. And we are mission-driven organization, and our mission is basically to serve international schools. And you can find our mission statement again on the website. Most importantly, we're a nonprofit. We are a 501c3 corporation, and we have always been a not-for-profit company. Our home office is in Princeton, New Jersey, where Princeton University is located. Originally it was actually New York City. That's when I first became involved with ISS, and then it was in downtown Princeton, and now we have our own offices out in the Carnegie Park out in the suburbs of Princeton. But we also have an office in China. We also have level 5 in China. We're about to open another level 5 office in Bahrain. And in addition, some of us work remotely. As I mentioned earlier, the 6 of us that Aaron introduced, only one is in Princeton, but we have people Colorado, Florida, Italy, China, and soon to be in Canada. So we are diversified geographically as well. We currently own, govern, or manage 16 schools throughout the world, and that number tends to fluctuate from year to year as new schools come on. Some schools they give up the management contract often when they become accredited, and we've gotten them through that process. Sometimes the schools close. A school in Borneo just closed because of oil prices and so forth, and Chevron curtailed their operations. The 3 schools we own, one is in China, in Checo, and we have 2 in the Caribbean. And all of those are not-for-profit schools. Traditionally, the managed schools were in remote locations and were often for extractive industries. I just mentioned Borneo. That was a Chevron oil company school. Chevron knows how to find oil, but they don't know how to run a school. But they needed schools for the dependents of their employees and would contract with ISS to set up and manage a school for them. We still have some of those, but we also now partner with private individuals who want to start a school. These may be for-profit schools, but we closely evaluate projects before becoming a partner. We offer a myriad of services for international schools. I mentioned earlier we were a full-service company. Most commonly known, as Aaron referred to, is teacher placement, or our international recruitment centers, or IRCs as they're called. In fact, some of us will be going to Atlanta next week for one of those. We also do administrative placements with Beth, which Beth oversees. We do consolidated materials recruitment for schools, purchasing, if you like, put it all in a container and send it to the school. We set up 501c3 foundations for schools. We provide curriculum support. We provide HR support for ISS schools. We organize summer leadership institutes for IS administrators. We develop teacher training programs through universities, accounting support for ISS schools, etc. Actually, if you go to our website, it's a relatively new website that has attracted a great deal of attention, and which will have many links that will be helpful to you. You can, if you go to the Discover tab, you'll find a lot more detail on what I've just covered all too briefly, and you'll see I'm sure you've all been to the website by now, but that's the link to it. And speaking of being helpful, we'll now go to Brad and Ashley, who will talk about what you should expect as you embark upon this search for an overseas position.
Ashley, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone around the world. Yeah, Brad, I don't know if you want to...
I was just going to mention, I again want to encourage our panelists. This topic that we're covering on this screen is really wide-ranging. So I'd like to encourage our panelists, if you come up with a thought or a random idiom, if you want, input from the rest of you is much appreciated. What to expect during your search? I'll just start off, and Ashley, please push me out of the way as often and as roughly as you choose to. Highly competitive, start early. I'll speak for myself. I'm quite compulsive. So for me, this really resonates, and what I added to this, and stay organized. If you're looking for a head of school search, often now they're coming out 2 years in advance. I think for the organizations doing the recruiting, that really broadens the application pool, because often then the candidates don't have to resign from their current position. And the other thing I'd encourage is, routinely check openings. They come up really fast out of the blue. You haven't heard that there's going to be an opening at a school. And when you start to read through the prospectus, the recruiting organization will often say, we have the right to close the search early if we find the right people. And if you don't get in early, you might miss that first batch of resumes that get sent on to the search committee. Ashley?
Yeah, definitely. You're right, Brad. When it comes to getting your stuff in, I really recommend, as soon as you see those announcements go out via email, that you get your application materials in as soon as possible. And that does mean just reading the details in those announcements. Most of them request that you send a letter of application, as well as your personal CV, to Dr. Beth Fannell, and CC myself, Ashley Wadaway, on those, so that we can record you as a candidate, and we can assist in getting you up and running with the directions that you need to finish the process. And the process does take a little bit of time, so it's really important to get that in as soon as possible, so that we can get you through the process and you can be considered a candidate for any of the searches that we handle.
Actually, you kind of went into the next one, I think rightfully so. Read the details. Try to get information from as many sources as possible. The ISS will provide the position statement from the school. It's nice and rich with information. But don't stop there. Go to the websites, look for information on blogs, try to get information from Facebook, Twitter, any source that you can. The only caveat that I would warn is any of those sources that you might find information from that are unmonitored or more anonymous, just read them analytically and read them with a grain of salt. It's really important to be able to discern, find out as much information, but discern that information. Ashley, anything more to continue there? And then why don't you take the next one?
No, I mean, I think you've really covered it, Brad. We just, we want to make sure that you are being as flexible as you can and really paying attention to all of the details with the search, and paying attention to what those schools are looking for within that position announcement so that you can speak to the position that you are applying for in the right way.
Awesome. The next one, be flexible and get your foot in the door. As I said before, if the position doesn't resonate with you and you know that it's not a fit, okay, it's not a fit, but be willing to stretch yourself. Be willing to stretch those personal boundaries and really look at your own professional and personal goals. Is this a place that I could really contribute to? Would working in this location contribute to me? So be willing to, as I said, stretch those personal boundaries within limits.
Right. Definitely. And I'm seeing a question that's popping up here about should a principal get recommendations from board members, or is it just the head of school that they should be getting recommendations from? And references are so important here. So if you are a principal and you have board members that are aware of your work and can speak to you in a reference, then absolutely add those references. We say that the minimum is 3, but references are one of the most important parts of your files there. So absolutely feel free to add those board members if you're a principal. And of course, if you're a higher level admin, such as a head of school, you'll want those board members or school owners. Right.
I'd add to that, make sure that those references are current or at least recent and relevant. I'll just speak to myself. When I look for candidates, peer references are not as appealing to me as supervisory references. I'm going to go back up to what schools are looking for. I realize I kind of muddied the water when I was talking about being flexible and finding a school that fits. I think when you're doing the research on the school, what schools are looking for, you really want to think about, what is this position? What do they want me to do there? If the school is running really well and everything is humming along and all the cylinders are firing, what they want is somebody who's going to be able to bring a lot of energy and continue that positive momentum. If there are issues at the school, challenges, maybe what they're looking for is a change agent, somebody who can bring in experience, somebody who can bring in a different skill set, but be ready to be responsive to that, either with recruiting or once you do get the job. It's hard to be, think I'm going to be everything like everything for everyone. If you do that too much, it can ring hollow. So be honest about who you are, what you can do. And then when you get the job, it's a more fulfilling and positive role for you. So we've covered importance of references there. Ashley, why don't you take that last one?
The search process can be long. Be patient. That is absolutely true. And that kind of segues right into our next topic about how to become an ISS member with us, because this is probably one of the longer processes here is getting set up to recruit with us. So
before you hand it off to yourself, I just wanted to add one thing there. You don't really know what the search committee is looking for. So as someone who's gone through a lot of school searches and not gotten a lot of those positions that I've pursued, that's one thing to remind yourself is go back to your strengths, go back to your experience, and stay positive. If you've put your, and it's a lot of work, you know, putting yourself out there, getting those resumes together, really positioning yourself, going through interviews with boards. You really need to solidify yourself and be ready to take rejection as an opportunity to grow. You don't know what the search committee was looking for necessarily. So you may have a phenomenal skill set, at least that's what I tell myself, but it wasn't exactly what they were looking for. And so I really try to, with each search, think about how I could improve and how I could grow from it. But I really try to not take rejection personally. So Ashley, on that, I know you're talking about recruiting with ISS.
Yeah, definitely. And you're so right, Brad. And, to everyone that signs up for these searches, we get your letters, we see your names, and we do keep those candidates in mind. Maybe this role wasn't right for you and the school and it wasn't a great fit, but we have you in the back of our mind for other searches. So that being said, we have two types of memberships. We have what's called an administrative search only membership. This is a free membership. The application is a little bit shorter, and this will allow you to apply to those positions that Dave, Beth, myself help in assisting. It's a contracted search from a school, so they've asked us to help them. So these positions are viewable on our administrative search website. This administrative search only membership allows you to apply to only those positions, and other schools that recruit with us cannot see you. Only we will see that application, as well as the school who we are working with for a particular position. Now, the other option is the full membership, and this is an awesome membership because you have access to an entire database of schools, hundreds of vacancies worldwide, teachers, administrators, everyone. So you aren't limited to just those jobs that you see on our public website. You'll be able to see many more, and schools and recruiters are actually going to be able to see your file too. They're going to have the ability to look for you as a candidate in our database. The application is a little bit longer than what you would see with the administrative search only membership. It's a little bit more detailed, but it's not hard and it's very much worth it. You also have the ability to attend all of our events, like the upcoming event in Atlanta this coming Sunday. So that full membership gives you access to those things. And that's $195. Now, you can always come on as an administrative search candidate for a free membership, and you may decide, you know what, I do want to explore more options, and that's completely fine. We'll just work with you to get you upgraded to that full membership. But again, just remember it may take a little bit more time to fill out that longer application, but that's no big deal. And then, of course, once you have this membership and you land that job as an administrator, you're going to have lots of other great opportunities from the administrative search team here that Beth and Dave will be able to go into more detail about all the services that we can provide.
I believe Beth and Dave are currently muted.
Once you become an administrator overseas, it's important to know that ISS is available to assist you. One of the things that we do is we provide training for school boards. So if you're a head of school overseas, you might want to reach out to us if your board is interested in government services. And we think all school boards should receive periodic governance training. We are also available to help you as a school leader on a consulting basis. In other words, if you are interested in board chair head relations and how that works. We could work with you very closely on that. We facilitate board head retreats, we conduct risk management audits, and we facilitate long-range strategic planning. It's also important to know that we work closely with schools on child protection services and recommend that all employees are checked, go through criminal checks to make sure that you are hiring the right people that provide safety for all children under your responsibility. We work with you for searches, of course, for teachers and also for principals if you're the school head. And all of that information is available on our website about teacher recruitment. We've been doing that for a long time. Dave, did you want to add something to that?
No, I just know we're running short on time, so we want to save time for questions, but we'd be glad to answer any questions if you have about this, even after the webinar is over.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Before we jump into the questions and answers, and we've had a lot of great questions thus far, I wanted to ask if anyone has any closing remarks that they want to say before we jump into it.
Just wish everybody the best of luck.
Me as well. This has been great, and I wish everybody great. And please send in your questions.
Yes, we'll be happy to help you.
So our first question, we did get a couple emailed in ahead of time. So we'll start with our first question, which is it necessary or recommended to possess a certificate or degree that focuses on global studies or leadership in education?
My opinion on this one is you would have to look at how much money it's going to take to invest in that degree. If you already have it, fine, it can't hurt. But I don't know that I would go out and pursue that degree specifically to get an administrative job. I think more importantly would be have certification and experience as an administrator, and perhaps an advanced degree in some area of education. That would be my thought.
Okay, so we have another question, which is, so they are currently a department head at a public school in the States, and they are very interested in moving into an administrative role at an international school. How do they make that leap to being an administrator abroad?
I can take that. I think the first thing is you have to apply. If you don't apply, you can't get a job. And many people tend to think that if they can't check off all the boxes and tick off everything, that they won't get a job. There are rarely people who are able to tick off every single box that's asked. So you apply. You look for a school that you think is a good fit. You read carefully what the position announcement is asking for. You speak to some of the points that you think you have qualifications for or experience with, and you write a very compelling letter of interest, highlighting what makes you unique for this position, even if you have not had an administrative position before. And I'll jump in here and respond to another question that I just saw recently that came up. It's really a misconception or a misperception that for many schools overseas, you have to have been a head of school in order to apply for a head of school. And the question came up about elite schools or more well-known schools overseas. I've seen many different occasions, schools that have hired people that they have determined to be talented and experienced and have something to offer that school. And it may not have been that they had been a previous head of school. So I hope that answers that question. I know many of you ask that often and think that if you haven't been a head of school, there's no reason to apply. Don't think that. Go for it, because many schools are looking for people out of the box, people who can offer something important to the school, and it may not have been as a previous head, per se.
Thank you so much, Beth. So our next question is is it possible to update your admin certification while you are abroad?
The answer is yes. Much will depend on the state or province that you're involved in, but there are many ways to do it through online programs. Some universities have programs overseas, but yes, the short answer is it's possible.
All right, thank you so much. Our next question is, it seems that many schools are looking for IB experience. Is this a requirement, or does Common Core and AP curriculum experience count as well?
Again, I think it depends on the school. Some schools will be very specific in saying that they will only hire people with IB experience. In my particular case, as a head of school, I hired, my thought was the best teacher for a position or the best administrator. And if they needed IB training, I would send them for IB training. So again, I think every school is unique in that way. And there isn't one specific answer.
All right. So Dave, you had mentioned previously about people going into administrators internationally as a second career. Is there any way you can expand upon that a little bit?
Sure. The international schools, I think, will value people's experience. And if you've been a successful administrator and have retired or decided to leave the system you're in, that experience will be valued. The only caveat is that there will be some schools who want people with prior administrative experience, prior overseas experience. So sometimes it becomes a catch-22. How do I get it if I don't already have it? But that's not true of all schools. The other caveat will be some countries are going to impose age restrictions. There are just some countries where we can't get a visa or a work permit for somebody over a certain age. Usually that's age 60. Having said that, we have a colleague who has been doing interim positions and she's in her 80s. So again, I'll go back to my opening statement. It will depend on the school, the country, your background, etc. But it's a wonderful way. I know a number of people who've had second careers overseas and have been very successful.
All right, thank you so much. Our next question is, online profiles, videos, etc. are still helpful tools for teachers. Are there any digital tools that administrators should be building or creating?
Ashley, can we defer to you on that?
There was stunned silence.
Yeah, I think we've got some non-tech sophisticated former administrators here, so Ashley may be able to help more with that.
No, certainly. So you just want to make sure that your file is, your ISS profile is as robust as possible. So it doesn't matter if you're a teacher or an administrator, whatever you would do with your teacher file, you'll want to do with your administrative file. So, the videos, the letters, the great personal CVs, all of those things. The more robust you can make your file, the better.
I'm just going to jump on top of that. One of the things that I encourage my own teachers to do is to keep an electronic portfolio, because I think as Ashley just said, when you are choosing which components, which lesson plan you're going to put in or which storyboard you're going to put in, that's as important as the item itself. Why did you choose that? So as administrators, I think that's a great strategy as well, is as you're going, keep a file for electronic illustrations of the work that you do.
All right, thank you. Our next question, is it possible to secure a dual position in leadership and teaching?
I would just jump in and say, in small schools, that's almost goes without saying. I mean, we have a school in China that has 7 students, so the administrator is also teaching, and there are a number of small schools that do that. In larger schools, it's probably harder to do both jobs, although I know there's some administrators who choose to do that. I wouldn't recommend it in your first year, but if it's something you feel passionate about and the school's okay with it, I think it's certainly an option.
All right, we only have time for about 2 more questions. I know we're running a little bit over, but I want to try and get as many questions in. Our next question is from Kenneth. He says that he finds the role of many GDs is to increase enrollment. Do you have any quick ideas about the best way to accomplish that?
I think that it's very important to understand exactly what the expectations are, because if it's just to accept people because they're breathing, obviously with that's questionable. Most schools have guidelines and cutoff points, and it's something that you have to be very well aware of what you're expected to do.
All right, thank you. We have another question, which is about references. So how do you manage references when you've worked at a school where neither board members nor the head of school were professionals in their roles?
Ouch. That's a hard one. I don't know if they mean professionals. They weren't professional educators, or they just didn't act professionally. So I'm not sure what the reference is there. But ISS will, and Ashley may want to address this, but we normally require 3 confidential references from people who supervised you, and 1 has to be from the current school you're in. We do know that from time to time people get caught in situations. As we've said earlier, there are thousands of these schools, and sometimes you get caught in situations that are not good ones. We try to work with folks when that happens, but we have to be very careful because we represent both the schools and we represent the candidates. And so what we're saying is to schools who are recruiting our candidates is that we've checked out the candidates as well. So it's a tough situation.
Yeah, you're right, Dave, definitely. When it comes to references, we do require that your current school, you have at least 1 confidential supervisory reference from that school. So if you are referring to maybe professional, not in the sense that they know or can speak to education or your role, maybe they're more of a proprietary school, the questions on the reference forms are fairly broad, and so they should be able to speak to any of those questions because it's about you and how well you do your job, regardless of maybe if they know education all that well.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so the last question we're going to ask is salary, retirement, health insurance, etc. What can I expect if I accept a position overseas?
Vast differences from school to school. Go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, exactly that. Every school is different in that respect, but what you should do is ask those questions specifically. Insurance is important. Some schools will offer private insurance. Some you'll be under the host country national insurance or a combination thereof. You want to make sure you understand that the salary, whether it's gross or net, and what the taxes are, because again, every country is unique in that respect. In some countries, the school will cover your taxes. In some countries, you won't be taxed for the first few years, but then you will be after the second year. So there is a great variety of responses to that question. But what you should expect and what you could expect is that you will have a good salary, that you'll have insurance, that you may have a retirement plan, that you may have airfare included to go home once a year. But you have to ask all of those questions. Dave, did you want to add something to that?
No, I think you covered it well, but it just, again, as we say, it all depends on the school, the country, and don't forget to factor in cost of living. $100,000 a year in Guatemala is far different from $100,000 a year in Tokyo. So,
All right. Thank you
That's
so very
true.
much. Thank you so very much. That is all we have time for today. The recording of the full webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. Also keep an eye out for the follow-up email, which will have the link to our recording, along with some further information about our services and administrative searches and everything going forward. Does anyone have any closing remarks before we finish for today?
thank you all for participating, and we wish you the best of luck. And keep in mind, ISS is here to help and support you in your search.
That's right. Reach out to us if you have any specific questions, or we can help you get that next job.
Please do. Thank you guys all so much for joining, and we look forward to working with you soon.
And I'll just echo all of my colleagues there. It's been a pleasure talking to everybody tonight. Good luck in your searches.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks to our panelists who are extraordinary. They have a ton of wisdom. We're so glad you joined us, including Ashley and Christina. Thanks for moderating. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.